Hey, E100 readers, welcome to Unit 19. This is 19 out of 20. This is our next to last unit. So in this unit, and for the last time in this unit, in this program, we're going to be reading more in the New Testament letters. The editors of this plan call this unit the Apostles' Teaching. That's a name inspired from Acts chapter 2, verse 42, which you may remember. It says the church continued steadfastly in the Apostles' teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayer. And so it's using some of the most famous, most memorable teaching from the New Testament letters as a way of sort of giving us an idea of what the apostles' teaching was, since it's contained in these letters as well. Now, in reading in this unit, we're going to read from Paul's letters, but we'll read from 3 of what we call the general letters. So let's talk about what those are. What are these general letters? Well, these are the books of Hebrews through Jude. The simplest way of describing this section of the New Testament is to say these are the letters that are written by somebody other than Paul. And they're called general letters, sometimes Catholic letters, not meaning Roman Catholic, but using that word to mean universal. Sometimes called general or Catholic letters because they're sent not to a specific person or a specific church, but to the church at large, maybe to churches in particular regions. And we read some particular regions in 1 Peter, for example, or of a particular type. A couple of these letters are probably written to predominantly Jewish churches with believers in Jesus who are of Jewish background, but not to just to say the church at Corinth or the church at Colossae, for example. Now, these letters, even though the general letters are disparate, they're written by different writers under different circumstances, they tend to go back to some of the same themes again and again. When you read them, you see there's a lot of emphasis on the difference between the true teaching of the gospel and false teaching, and instruction on avoiding false teaching and false teachers. They deal a lot with suffering and opposition, and there's a lot of concern about applying the gospel consistently to everyday life, just as we would see in Paul's letters there, of course, as well. So what passages are we looking at this week? Well, first of all, 1 Corinthians 13, the famous love chapter. You may be familiar with this chapter already. Now, sometimes I think we get the impression that Paul wrote this so we'd have something to read at weddings, and it's great to read then. It's great. It's applicable to any setting, situation, circumstance. But it's interesting that in 1 Corinthians, Paul says this in the middle of a longer discussion about the way the Spirit has gifted people in different ways. And so it's a reminder that we should treat one another with love and exercise our gifts with love in that context. Then we'll go to 2 Corinthians, Paul's second letter to the Corinthian church, and there we'll read chapters 4 to 6, which is really much very much Paul's reflection on what it means to follow Jesus when we're suffering, and how the Lord is strengthening us and renewing us and remaking us through all of the circumstances of life. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we're being renewed day by day. We read that, and as well as many other memorable expressions in this section. We'll read about a chapter and a half of 1 Peter 1, the beginning of 1 Peter 2, where Peter is addressing the church at large about the living hope that they have in the face of some real suffering and opposition. And to understand, we face that suffering just as Christ faced suffering. So we're to live as God's true priests in the world as we're surrounded by evil. We'll read James chapters 1 and 2, which are also about suffering, very similar to 1 Peter, but talking about sincere and a consistent application of the gospel, and how claiming that we have faith, if we don't put it into practice, is meaningless. If we really believe things, we act on them, right? And then we'll read a bit of 1 John. 1 John is a beautiful and simple but profound letter, and much of it is reflecting on how we are to love one another as God has loved us in Christ. John was probably writing to people who are being told, oh, you can be superior to other people because of your greater spiritual knowledge. And he's saying, no, you only know anything through Jesus. And because of Jesus, you can't lord it over people and say you're better. You love one another as God in Christ has loved you. All right, so happy reading in this unit. I think you're really going to enjoy these texts, and you're going to want to go back to them again and again after this program is over.